Good morning, students. So we're continuing with the revision of constructors and destructors in C++. So in the previous video we have seen what is constructor, definition of constructors, and what is default constructor. So today we shall see parameterized constructor. So since there are different types of constructor, we have already seen the default constructor. So today's topic will be on this parameterized constructor. So what is a parameterized constructor? So constructors that can have arguments or that can have parameters of different data types. So parameters, so that can declare parameters variables of different data types and can pass arguments, that is values, is called as parameterized constructor. So if you see this particular program, the same program, so you can see that in the public member function declaration section, this is a normal member function, but here you can see that this is not this is the constructor declaration, but in this case this is a parameterized constructor declaration. As you can see that within the parenthesis, by default the constructor does not have parameters, but in the case of this you can see that the parameter type is there, the parameter name is there, right? So the data types are different: integer, character. So here you can see that three parameters are declared of different data types: integer, character. So this is what is called as a parameterized constructor declaration. So here uh, this has been declared in the class definition. So as you can see here, the this is the call function, uh, that is the, you can see that here this is the class name, this is the constructor name, this is the constructor, but in the case of the parenthesis you can see that it is same, the parameters, right? So based on the order: integer, character, yeah, character. So if you go back to the main function, you can see that the class the class is declaring an object emb. So this object emb is passing these arguments, that is 100, Mr. John Smith, and computer teacher, the values to the call function. So this is invoking, actually this is the invoking the constructor through the object, right? So the object is passing the values, that is the arguments, to the constructor. So in this case you can see that this is passing values as argument using implicit call. So implicitly it is passing the value. So this implicit call we'll discuss in the next page. So uh, in the case of this, these values will be passed to these parameters: e code, e name, and e designation, and that value which is stored in e code will be passed to the members of the class, that is employee code. Okay, and using the string copy function, ename that data values will be passed to emb name, and e designation data values will be passed to emb designation. Right. So here you can see that the when the objects gets declared, the constructor automatically gets invoked, but here using the constructor you can see that you are able to pass the values to the members of the object, right? Now, so that is the only difference between a default constructor and a parameterized constructor. In the case of default constructor, if no proper initialization is done, then the default constructor initialize the object members to a default value like 0 or null, like that. Or in the case of default constructor, if uh, using the object then the in the constructor function body, the object members can be initialized with user defined values also, right? But in the case of this one you can see that implicit call has been done. All right, so what is implicit call we'll discuss in the next page, so you'll get to know more about that. All right, so by default you can see that in the case of this one, the parameterized constructor passes the values using implicit call. So here passing initial values as argument using implicit call. So when the entire members of an object, that is the in the case of these private data members, right, of parameterized constructor gets initialized at the main function, okay, gets initialized at the main function, then it is called as implicit call. So here you can see that using the object, the values 100, Mr. John Smith, and computer teacher is passed to the constructor members, right? So this is the constructor and this is the data members, so which are declared here, right? So these parameters are declared within the constructor function body. So here you can see that this is the initial values, all right? So these initial values, when the entire members of an object of parameterized constructor gets initialized at the main function, then it is called as implicit call constructor, okay? So this is the initial values, that is 100, Mr. John Smith, and computer teacher, right? So what is the use of this implicit call, or what does this implicit call actually means? Okay, in the case of this, you can see that if suppose here the parameterized constructor has been declared, which is a default constructor. Now there may be many constructors that may be declared here. There may be default constructor, there may be copy constructor, there may be parameterized constructor, and such, right? So what happens is that here declaring the object itself, okay, once here, as soon as the object gets declared, so the object passes these values, right? So in the case of that, if if no parameterized constructors are declared, then by default, okay, the constructor will declare or create a parameterized constructor. Or in the case of if there are many constructors like default constructor, parameterized constructor, or copy constructor, right? So here what happens is that since the object is directly passing these values, right, so what will happen is that the compiler will search for, okay, which constructor will this value be sent to, right? So this object, okay, by sending these initial values, it will invoke the parameterized constructor, all right? So here it does not, here actually it is not mentioning that, okay, we're going to use the parameterized constructor, right, in short, just in simple English. So but here by looking at these initial values, okay, we get to know that, okay, so this is to be sent to the parameterized constructor, right? So that is like implicit, okay, without mentioning that we are going to use the parameterized constructor, right? So now here in the case of passing initial values as arguments using explicit call, so here when the constructor is called at the object declaration, so here you can see that the constructor is directly called at the object declaration to initialize the object members, where the initial values of private data members, that is initial values of private data members, can retrieve the constructor explicitly. So here you can see that a parameterized constructor is explicitly declared, all right? And then this is so here the constructor is declaring these parameters, right? And here the object data members will get initialized, that is the using the constructor parameters, it will be passed to the private data members of the object, right? So here you can see that employee emp equals to employee. So this is the class name, this is the object. So when the object gets declared, you can see that the constructor gets called explicitly, right? So and then using the constructor, the values are passed to this e code, e name, and e designation. So here here it's showing that, okay, it's telling the compiler that we are it is explicitly declaring that, okay, this is to be passed to the parameterized constructor and not to default constructor and not to the that means in the case of this one, it already has a declared parameterized constructor, right? So which means that it's telling the compiler, okay, this is to be passed to the parameterized constructor, right? So this is something, so the difference between explicit and implicit is something like explicit means it's already known in advance, okay, where the initial values is to be passed. That means the parameterized constructor, right? In the case of implicit, all right, the object passes the initial values and the compiler searches, okay, for the parameterized constructor, right, without mentioning that it is a parameterized constructor. All right, so that is the only difference between using the implicit call and the explicit call, okay, which is, if you remember, we use in SQL also, right? uh, Passing the putting the null values, the null keyword using implicit and explicit means, okay, which is similar to that, right? So just go through this, okay, go through the default constructor and go through this parameterized constructor, and then using implicit call and explicit call methods, right?